everyone, and welcome to the Culture Cast. I'm Chris Stashio, and I am joined by the master of podcasting, the one and only Mr. Mike White of the Projection Booth.
And a big, big fan of, well, it's not pudding. What is this stuff?
Pudding. That's what he says, pudding.
Oh, I thought it was...
Well, I don't get a good pudding at home.
I thought they called it custard.
That's custard. Yeah, that's right. No, they say pudding or custard.
I don't know.
Well, however he says it, it's so disgusting. And the scene hasn't even gotten to the gross part. So we are going to be talking about Brain Dead. That's the original title of the film. However, it would be better known in the States as Dead Alive.
On this picturesque block, in this manicured home, something evil, something terrifying, something horrifying is haunting Lionel. His mother.
I thought I told you to spray this house. The place is infested with vermin.
Although she was a little strict,
Look at this dust. It's an inch thick.
he never wished her any harm.
You look after me, Lionel.
Until
Your mother's dead, Lionel.
now, whatever Mom's got
Who's your mother?
has caught on with the neighbors.
She's been bitten. You know what that means?
You can pray.
I kick ass for the Lord.
You can plead. You can beg for mercy.
Help! Someone! Please!
But nothing you can do will stop.
There's thousands of them!
Because how do you kill something that's already dead? Trimark Pictures presents a modern masterpiece of horror.
Your mother ate my dog!
Dead Alive.
Party's over.
So the film came out in 1993 in the States, 92 in New Zealand. It is directed by Peter Jackson. Yes, the Peter Jackson who directed Lord of the Rings. It's written by Stephen Sinclair. It stars Timothy Balmy, Diana Peñalver, and Elizabeth Moody.
Don't forget that Fran and Peter helped write the screenplay.
Yeah, true. That's right. There's three writing credits. Fran and Peter Jackson, though it's Frances Walsh, not Fran. This was before she dropped the CES.
Oh, Franny. Aye, Franny.
And the film follows Lionel, played by Timothy Balmy, as a mama's boy who ends up getting more than he asked for when his mom gets bitten by a Sumatran rat monkey, and she turns into the undead and then ends up turning more people into the undead, and then it has what I can only call one of the best climaxes in film history. We'll talk about it. I'm curious, Mike. I know this is definitely not the first time you've seen this movie. It can't be. If it is, I would be shocked. Right? I mean, there's no way. I kind of imagine a young Mike White watching this when he was in college on VHS. How close am I?
I think I might have graduated, but you're pretty darn close, yeah. I think it was probably like 94, 95, checking this out, and it was one of those movies where almost immediately upon release I heard, oh, the US version is cut. So I think I ended up still renting it or just taking it out of Blockbuster where I was working at the time, or I might have done a little bit of bootlegging and gotten an uncut version, but I think that was more my history with Meet the Feebles versus Dead Alive. I think I just watched this on VHS.
Yeah, I saw a really shitty version of Meet the Feebles.
Yeah.
Because it's still kind of hard to find, isn't it? Or maybe not.
I think it is presently. I don't think that there are any like really super legit versions of it, and I'm probably wrong. I'm sure that there are probably people yelling at the radio right now because people listen.
Arrow Factory or Scream Vision probably released a version of it.
Because people listen to this on the radio, by the way. But
they tuned their dial in, right?
Yes.
Isn't that how this works?
There's a little bit of static.
Down to KULT, coming into you live into your home, the Culture Cast.
But the good news is that there is allegedly some 4K restorations of this, Bad Taste, and Meet the Feebles all on the way with like extras and deleted scenes, probably director's commentary, all that kind of stuff. So I just really can't wait to see that.
But what do you think of Brain Dead?
I fucking love Brain Dead. It was so much fun. I mean, it's funny to me the way that the paths that Peter Jackson and then Michigan's own Sam Raimi seem to follow. They both seem to start off with this kind of like splat stick type comedy thing that they were doing, and then moved into like, because I want to say his next film after this was Heavenly Creatures, and it's just like, what the hell? Like, you would never think that the guy who made Heavenly Creatures made this, made Meet the Feebles, made Bad Taste, but he just like had this huge development, and then, you know, a few years after that, it's like, oh yeah, he's the guy who's going to be doing The Lord of the Rings, and it's just like, okay, yeah, I guess I can see that. I mean, I've seen him do both like really lo-fi special effects and then very hi-fi special effects with what he did in Heavenly Creatures. Okay, I can see that. And then, you know, it's like kind of the same thing with like Raimi took a little bit longer, but, you know, like going from The Evil Dead to Spider-Man, like, was one of the biggest opening box offices of the time. It was a huge, like, pretty much put Marvel on the right path when it came to like what they ended up doing now. So it's very funny to me to see those parallels, and I see a lot of Raimi-type humor when it comes to stuff like Brain Dead, and I think that's one reason why I appreciate this movie so much.
Yeah, it definitely does feel like a Raimi film. I'll tell you what, though, Raimi's Evil Dead, the original, is much less of a comedy.
Oh, yeah.
Than this film is. I mean, this film is, for all intents and purposes, a comedy first, a horror film second. And that's the way I feel. Maybe you don't feel the same way, but Evil Dead for me is a horror film first, comedy second.
Right. I'm more of a fan of Evil Dead 2.
I think everybody is. I just think some people like to be like, oh, I like the first one more. It's like you technically know they're the same movie.
Right. Pretty much.
Yeah, they're essentially the same film.
Because there's no reason why Ash would ever go back to that cabin.
Right. Which is completely fair. And considering how the way the first one ends, yeah, it makes almost no sense why the second one is just the same movie. And then obviously you have Army of Darkness, which I would contend is a comedy first, action film second, horror movie third.
Agreed.
So, Dead Alive, though, this is one of the first, because I was not into horror movies growing up. I just wasn't my jam. And the older I got, the more I was kind of curious about horror, and it was kind of something I really wanted to kind of get into. And this was one of the first horror movies I watched, and that was primarily because of the poster, the album artwork, Jesus, the VHS cover with the woman opening her mouth with the skull inside.
Yeah.
And it's such a great artwork. It's such a great cover, and it's so effective. And you know what? The crazy thing is, speaking of Evil Dead, how many people would think that that's the cover for Evil Dead 2?
Right. Yeah, I can totally see that.
But I rarely say this, especially about horror movies, but this may be a genuinely perfect movie in every sense of the word. And the fact that it's done on a shoestring budget with the effects in this movie, you can't beat them. There's just the amount of practical effects in the last 30 to 40 minutes of this film are completely insane.
Yeah, there are some really amazing things. I mean, even just like silly stuff like the whole sequence where the guy gets pulled in two and his legs are outside the door, and those legs look really good. And then that his innards come out and start chasing the guy, and that the innards become almost more of a threat than the guy himself. And then when he gets reunited with his legs later on, and the way he has to move his legs with his arms, it all looks and works very well.
Yeah, it's a really satisfying physical, like, as a really satisfying practical effects film. And what's satisfying about it is the fact that I don't sit and wonder how they did it. I just go along for the ride. Mm-hmm. And you can barely see the strings, as Father Malone would say. And look, the only slight knock against this movie, and I'm sure you probably laugh as much as I do, is the scene at the playground with what is clearly a small person in a baby costume.
But it's so amazing, though. I love it.
It's so good in like the worst way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when he runs away and then just those horrible, like, laughs that he's doing. It's so good.
Yeah. It's a film that, look, it's not, I wouldn't say it's not the most creative, because honestly, it's very creative. It takes a zombie trope that you're used to, and I guess they're zombies. Not really. They're the undead, but they're not zombies.
Right. But though their bite does turn you into something else. I mean, their bite does begin the process.
I would say that this version of the zombie is maybe I've looked and I couldn't find it, but I can't help but wonder if Peter Jackson and Steven Sinclair and Fran Walsh took a little bit of inspiration from Return of the Living Dead. Because in that film, you can't kill them by destroying the brain.
Right.
They're still alive, and they're, there's a skeleton at one point that's running around.
Right.
And like that's kind of what this film has. There doesn't seem to be a way to kill them in the quote-unquote conventional zombie sense, similarly to Return of the Living Dead, which I like because it amps up the stakes a lot.
I wanted to say before I forgot, as far as special effects, when they pull off the guy's face and it's the skeleton underneath, I love that effect. I think that is really well done.
Oh, when it's just the muscle?
Yeah. And
then he pops up into frame?
Yeah, it looks really good.
God.
Even the guy who gets the top of his head cut off with the shears. I like the top of the head and the way that they're kicking it around and stuff. And sometimes they'll like insert I think what is the guy's real face in a close-up of that. So, either that or it's a really good animatronic thing because it's reacting.
Well, and the other one that's pretty good, but it also, again, kind of, it verges on not... There's problems I have with it are the scenes when was it Roger? Is that his name? The uncle?
Yeah.
No, not Roger.
Uncle Les.
Uncle Les. In Ian Watkin, when he gets murdered by the mother, and it's like, it almost looks like the creature from The Thing.
Yeah.
When it's like an elongated head running around, that's a little hokey. But again, like I'm so enthralled and so on board with the movie that I don't really care. But that and the baby are the only ones. But yeah, I mean, there's so many cool effects. I mean, we could just name all of them. I mean, we're not going to, but like the ones that stick out to me, like you mentioned, the guy getting cut in half with the innards, the head in the blender.
Yeah, that's nice.
The light through the back of the woman's head. I think it's just insanely novel. The gnome walking around with the gnome. I mean, the thing, if anyone has ever seen a clip from this movie, the clip that you've seen is "Let's party," and he pulls the lawnmower that's attached to his chest.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. I mean, again, it's very much. It's like. He was like, okay, Ash has got the chainsaw. What am I going to give this guy? How about the fucking lawnmower? And it just is so good. Man, the scene that is earlier when he is trying to run out and the floor is so bloody that he's slipping all over the floor and can't get any traction. That is always hilarious. Almost as hilarious as Father Magruder, who kicks ass for the Lord. Right, yeah. I kick ass for the Lord. I mean, Stuart Devaney is great. It's kind of a bummer that his character becomes one of the undead, though it does lead to the undead baby, which is... Again, the undead baby. Look, I was watching this movie last night with my wife, and Mike and I have had multiple conversations about our significant others and the movies that we watch with them, and she could not bring herself to look at the screen because she was so grossed out, especially the custard part, which... I mean, look, the custard scene, it's disgusting before it even gets disgusting. Yeah. Well, just because the nurse with how she... Those horrible noises she makes, that gurgling noise when her head flips back. Oh.
But like the thing with the custard where the guy's like, oh, this custard's great. It's got like that, like the spittle in his mouth.
Yeah.
And like, it's like, he's clearly putting on the affectation of a fat man talking about food. Mm-hmm. And that's like that's exactly what he's going for. He achieves it 100% perfectly. And it works, but then you have the pus shooting into the bowl of pudding, and it's so fucking gross, but at the same time, it's also hilarious.
Yeah. Oh, God. And just the wife, the look on her face, she can't even say anything, and she is seeing everything happen.
Does she see the mom eat the ear?
Yes.
Oh, God. Like, what is, like, the thing I do love about this movie is, like, it is existing in some universe where, like, this is okay. Like, her ear just falls off, and she's like, okay, whatever, fuck it.
Well, like all the people at the park, you know, they would be, if that really happened, and the way that he's beating up that baby, it's so good.
Right?
Oh, I love it.
And one of the other effects that I do want to mention that I feel like kind of gets overlooked, the Sumatran rat monkey. I really like that practical effect.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The stop motion animation on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah. And again, Peter Jackson did a lot with a very small budget.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I love about this movie is, and I kind of miss that. I mean, that's the thing I've kind of always said whenever this film comes up in conversation. This movie was made on a budget of $3 million. You honestly could not tell that.
No.
But I really wish that Peter Jackson was making more films like this and less... Look, as much as I love Lord of the Rings, which I love Lord of the Rings as much as the next person, I really wish that he would make something like this again.
Yeah, I was really hoping... Like, you know, this movie starts on Skull Island, and there's a reference to the Sumatran rat monkey in his version of King Kong. But that was just like the worst bloated piece of garbage for me. It was just like, oh my God, you have to make this 3 hours long? What are you doing? I was really hoping that it would be like, okay, an update of Kong with like really good special effects, as we saw with Andy Serkis. But then like those fucking dinosaurs that are running after those guys, those are some of the worst special effects I've ever seen.
And the, what is it, like the worms that eat someone at one point? Like, that movie is, look, it's clearly something that Peter Jackson always wanted to make.
Yep.
I can't fault him for that. It's a vanity project, maybe? I mean, look, by the time he made King Kong, he had already made Lord of the Rings, so he's one of the most successful filmmakers of the last 20, 30 years. I mean, the Lord of the Rings films are fantastic. Right. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. But yeah, King Kong is not... I mean, if we're talking about Peter Jackson's filmography, like, King Kong is very low at the bottom.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, because like you said, I mean, he could have really made it something interesting, and outside of essentially further reinforcing why Andy Serkis might be one of the best actors working in Hollywood who gets no credit for what he does, it's not much of a great film.
No. I mean, I think the only thing that might be worse in his filmography is The Lovely Bones. I mean, if we're though... I mean, the Hobbit films, some of those, especially that third one.
The Hobbit films are very much like a director for hire.
Yeah, I mean,
but like,
God,
at the same
I wish
time,
I could see what Guillermo del Toro was going to do.
Well, the thing about the Hobbit movies that I always find weird is, yeah, I get that he made the Lord of the Rings films, but that doesn't mean he has to make The Hobbit.
Right, no, and he wasn't supposed to.
Right, exactly. And The Hobbit was only supposed to be one movie anyways.
Right. I think
and then it became 3.
Yeah, they were talking at one point about being 2, and I would have been fine with 2. But yeah, 3 was just one too many.
They roped in the Silmarillion somehow, and it's like, guys, you're...
Yeah. Now, I have to be honest, I haven't seen They Shall Not Grow Old. I really want to see that one. And I have to say
it's
also...
It's a documentary, though.
Yeah. And his other documentary, quote-unquote, Forgotten Silver, I don't know if you've ever had a chance to see that, but it is fucking amazing.
I have not.
Oh, it is fantastic. It's a mockumentary about a guy named Colin McKenzie, who was I think it was turn of the 18th to 19th century filmmaker who basically invented everything in the entire world before anybody else invented it. It was just like this hilarious thing of like, well, yeah, he did the first close-up and he did the first special effect shot. And then like it just keeps getting more and more outrageous as the story goes on. It is fantastic.
See, that's the kind of stuff I wish he still made, because that sounds, like, legitimately interesting. And if you look at his filmography, Bad Taste, Meet the Feebles, Dead Alive, you have Heavenly Creatures. Heavenly Creatures is or is not an adaptation?
Heavenly Creatures is a retelling of a true life story that was actually based on a crime that happened in New Zealand.
Right. So, again, it's based off of something that happened in reality. So, that's 3 movies. You have The Frighteners, that's 4. Then he does all the Lord of the Rings films. He does King Kong. Lovely Bones was an adaptation. Then he does the Hobbit films. So he has like 5 movies that aren't, inspired by or adaptations of pre-existing works. And to me, it's like, I really wish Peter Jackson would go back to doing original ideas. Because the next movie, supposedly, that he's going to be working on, feature film, not documentary, is The Adventures of Tintin sequel. And look, I'll be one of the first people to tell you, that Tintin movie is the best Indiana Jones sequel we ever got.
I haven't seen it yet.
It's a lot of fun.
Okay.
And if you watch it and Crystal Skull, you'd be like, I kind of just wish that this was an Indiana Jones movie. It's got Daniel Craig in it.
Cool.
It's got, I don't know, there's like a lot of fun action sequences that are very, pulp. I mean, that's obviously what the Tintin comic is, pulp inspired. But again, like you said, Peter Jackson's filmography now is just, he's known for Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit.
Yeah.
And they roped him into the Amazon show too, I think. Or no, he's not. Or he is, or he isn't.
I don't think he is. I know one of his future projects is that he got all that Beatles footage that was hard to find, and some of it was quote-unquote unreleased. Yeah. So I'm very curious to see what he does with that, especially after, I haven't seen They Shall Not Grow Old, but I've seen some of the effects work that he's done for that, and it was fantastic. So I can't imagine what he's going to do with this Beatles stuff.
And you mentioned The Lovely Bones. That movie and that book are just...
They're trash.
Yeah, the book and the movie are pandering...
Yep.
Beach reads that I don't understand. I understand why they have an audience, and I don't want to poo-poo the people who like it, but you have to understand that when someone sets out to write a book that is made to make you cry, and that's the only point, it's probably not worth your time reading, because if that's all they're trying to do, they're not actually trying to entertain you.
Exactly.
And like, oh, she died and she got murdered, and then, it's like, oh my God, like, it's so saccharine and melancholy, and I watched the movie. I don't get it. I was forced to read the book in high school.
Ooh.
I didn't get it. Yeah, it was like one of those things where it's like, why are we reading this? Like, this is such a weird book to be required reading.
Yeah.
It's like the things they carried. Like, why are we reading this in 2008?
Right.
Holy shit. Like, isn't this book a little dated for high school kids?
For God's sakes, read The Scarlet Letter, or something that's actually well written.
Oh, we did read The Scarlet Letter.
Okay, that works.
I mean, we read Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. That's a great book.
Yeah.
But like The Lovely Bones, like, why is that even making the cut?
Yeah.
Why is The Hobbit making the cut either? For real, like it's not very great. Like, of the J.R.R. Tolkien books, The Hobbit is not the one I would suggest people read.
No, that's a good, like, 7th grade kind of a thing. It's like starting to get into more, quote-unquote, serious literature kind of thing. And it's like you can read it in a couple days, maybe an afternoon. Obviously, you can read the book faster than you can watch the movies.
Boy, isn't that fucked up?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
And we've kind of danced around it, but that's primarily because I'm going to be talking about it on your podcast sometime in the very near soon future, The Frighteners, which it's as close to his original films that he's made as we're ever going to get, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a completely different story for another podcast, and I'm excited to talk about that with you. Back to Dead Alive, though. One of the things about Dead Alive, the whole Raimi connection, I do find interesting, because I couldn't also find any interviews or anything with Peter Jackson saying that was something that he was tacitly internalizing that was an inspiration.
Yeah, I could just be reading a bunch of stuff into that, but really, like,
it
Bad Taste feels so similar, and this one feels so similar. Okay.
I don't think you're reading into it. It's pretty obvious. The effect of the mother when she is starting to decay looks just like
Henrietta.
Professor Noby's wife, Henrietta, in Evil Dead 2.
Mm-hmm.
Like, almost identical before she, like, mutates into the fucking bird thing. It looks like a bird to me, but it's not a bird, but it's like a weird long neck monster.
Yeah, I guess you're right. The one... long neck thing that was going on in Evil Dead 2 is very similar to what the uncle, because you mentioned The Thing, which I also was thinking of The Thing, but there's also the long neck creature in Evil Dead 2 as well. I swallow your soul, I swallow your soul.
Yeah. Well, and then at the end of this film, the mom almost looks like that thing with the long neck.
Right.
And I don't want to read into Steven Sinclair and Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh, but somebody's got mommy issues.
Oh, God, yeah. The whole monstrous mother figure.
The monstrous mother figure, and whenever I tell someone about this movie, the term I use is the most disgusting rebirth you've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, as I was watching this, I was just like, I wonder if anybody's written a term paper yet about this. I'm sure that they have.
Right, because the end of the film, I don't want to spoil it, because this is a film that if you've never seen it, you really should go and watch it, but there is a rebirthing scene that is just as disgusting as it sounds.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's a cathartic journey you go on with the character of Lionel that you feel that payoff.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about the twist, though. The twist feels a little tacked on.
Well, yeah. I mean, I could tell that was coming from almost the very first time that it happened.
Sure, because it's like, who's remembering this? How are you remembering it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it didn't necessarily feel as fleshed out as it could. Like, there was a moment there where I was like, oh, well, maybe Henrietta isn't his mother at all. Or, sorry, maybe his mother isn't his mother at all. Maybe it is somebody else. Maybe she's, somehow adopted him or got him. Maybe she murdered his parents and then, took him as her own. I kind of would have liked that even more.
Yeah, I honestly don't know why they didn't do that. I mean, if, look, the twist that they did, again, for me, it doesn't land, but it feels like either really do something interesting with it where you're not his mother, or just don't do it at all. Because it doesn't, the film doesn't really need it. She could have just been an overbearing mom.
Right.
And it's not like the dad came back or something. Like, that was always one of the things I was like, why don't they just have the dad come back?
Yeah. I have to say that, have you ever seen, God, I'm going to screw up his name, Baz Luhrmann's Strictly Ballroom?
I have not.
Because there's some interesting parallels between the two of those as far as, like, the deep family secret, the immigrant family, and, like, having to use the quote-unquote magic of the immigrant family to unlock some of this stuff. I mean, I did like this whole thing of Paquita being an immigrant and the whole, like, Romani thing that was going on with her and her grandmother and stuff. That was kind of a neat way to take that. And I liked how when she goes away from Lionel for a while and she ends up back with that guy who you think that she might be with at the beginning, just what a complete bore he is, and that Lionel's more of an exciting presence.
Yeah, it sounds like there are a lot of parallels. I mean, I don't know. It feels like this movie is a mashup of a lot of other really great things, and when they do that normally, it doesn't pan out very well.
Right.
But in this film's case, I would almost rather watch this than Evil Dead 2.
Oh, yeah.
I know that's sacrilege, because Evil Dead 2 is great. I mean, I love it. And that movie, if you could put Bruce Campbell in this film, you'd have a practically even better film than this film is right now.
Yeah.
But Timothy Balmy's character of Lionel is so good at being that kind of shy, nebbish character that it works. But yeah, it's all these kind of weird connections to other things that they kind of cop from other things, and normally that doesn't go very well.
Right, exactly. Yeah, a lot of times it can be just a disaster. I'm looking at you, Doomsday.
Right, Jesus.
I've always wanted to see this other movie that the guy who, had the story credit and was one of the screenwriters, I think he either wrote it or directed it, and I know that Peter Jackson produced it. It's called Jack Brown Genius, and it's got the same guy. It's got Lionel as the main character, and I've never been able to track that down. I think it's only like on DVD in Australia, and even there it's kind of tough to find.
You gotta call in your connections.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe once Xfinity takes the cap off of my data, maybe I'll be able to find a version.
I mean, we could probably find it if we searched hard enough through the back channels of the internet.
The back channels, yes.
I mean, look, let me put it this way. The version of this movie that I watched was fucking awful.
Yeah, like I said...
I mean, I know you talked about the 4K coming out, but, like, there hasn't been a real proper release of this movie. Even the DVD version is god-awful.
Oh, yeah, they really need to do themselves a favor and get this stuff out sooner rather than later.
And, so the weird thing is, imagine another filmmaker who went on to make a film like Lord of the Rings. They would probably, like, distance themselves from this film.
Right.
But I feel like Peter Jackson has embraced it.
Oh, yeah, he completely has, which really
is weird,
appreciate.
Right?
Well, it's weird in a way, but at the same time,
It's not industry standard, let's put it that way.
No, I mean, it's like I just watched Return of the Killer Tomatoes, and, like, George Clooney's the star of it, and it's just like, okay, yeah, it's probably not something that he talks about all the time or is trying to fight for getting out on Blu-ray or something, but, it's like, yeah, the people who can accept their past and embrace it like Jackson does, it's fantastic.
I mean, like Johnny Depp with the original Nightmare, like he'll give it like a passing, oh yeah, it was great, whatever. But, like he doesn't give a shit,
No.
and that's where he got his start. And like you can't change the past with your filmography.
Yeah.
And unless you're Chloe Sevigny doing Brown Bunny, you probably haven't done anything that would be like, oh my God, get away from me.
Right.
And even then, like Brown Bunny is what it is, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, look. Peter Jackson made Bad Taste, Meet the Feebles, and Dead Alive, and those are his first 3 films, and I'm glad that he's embraced it, because they're films that are so much fun. At least, I've never seen Bad Taste, but I would assume it's a lot of fun, just knowing Peter Jackson.
It is. It's pretty amazing.
But Meet the Feebles and Dead Alive are just 2 great examples of subversive film. Subversive exploitation film, because this is ultimately like an exploitation film. More or less. I would say maybe it's not, but splatter gore is exploitation. It's just...
Yeah. And this was being put out at a time before zombies were coming out like on a weekly basis. I mean, I think they've kind of cooled it now, which is good, but there's a time there, a couple of years in the 2000s where it was just zombie film after zombie film after zombie film. And, so many some were great. Some got lost in the shuffle that were really good. A lot of them were just absolute garbage. But this was coming out in, 92, 93, and it was not necessarily the most popular thing in the world to do. And I thought that he handled it very well. And yeah, the whole idea of it, to your point from earlier, not necessarily coming from an undead corpse, coming from this rat monkey, I thought was a nice twist.
And the Sumatran rat monkey is that is the best, device through which to create undead. Like, I know everyone's like, oh, Dawn of the Dead, we don't know what it is. Or Shaun of the Dead, what could it be? It could be any number of things. Like, I like in this movie, it's like, nah, it's just this fucking rat monster in a cage. I love that. It's so hilariously to the point.
And that they fucking murder that guy who gets the bite at the beginning. I love it.
He has the bite on his hand, on his arm, on his face.
Splat.
It's so good.
Oh.
But, yeah, this is one of those movies where I really love it a lot every time I watch it. And I rewatch it every couple years. Every time I rewatch it, it fills me with so much joy to watch this film because it's so much fun. It's so over the top. It almost feels like, and I know we talked about this earlier in the year, it almost feels like late era Ozploitation.
Yeah.
Right? But obviously I'm not going to take anything away from any Kiwis listening to this podcast. This is a truly Kiwi New Zealander film. This is not Ozploitation. This is there even a term, Kiwi-sploitation?
Maybe.
Peter Jackson. That's what it is. It's Peter Jackson. But it really fits into Evil Dead, Reanimator, that kind of subsection of gorehound films, and that's why I love it. And it's so much fun, and I honestly can't say enough good things about this.
Yeah, I completely agree. I can see why you love this movie, and I 100% back that.
So what would you give the film out of 5?
Oh, I'd probably give this, I'm tempted to give it 5 out of 5 because I just love it so much.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. It's a 5 out of 5. Again, even the hokey effects, I still love them to death because it's just there's a fucking baby, a man in a baby suit, or a small person in a baby suit running around. I love it. It's great. It works within the construct of the film. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those movies where if you've never seen it and you're into this kind of movie, you're doing yourself a disservice by not having seen it.
Completely agree.
So, let's take a break and we'll play a preview for the next Culture Cast.
Moshi moshi.
Moshi moshi.
Moshi moshi.
Moshi moshi.
Moshi moshi.
Moshi moshi.
That's right. On the next Culture Cast, we are going to be wrapping up Body Horror Month with a look at a film that I have never seen, but I am excited to watch it. We're going to be watching Tetsuo the Iron Man. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, I haven't seen it either. So, it's body horror. We're ending the month with it. It's about a Japanese guy who becomes one with a machine, so who knows? Has a possibility to be something interesting. It sounds interesting. So, and I'm going to be joined by our good mutual friend, Mrs. Jess Byard. She's going to help me round out the month. So, until then, where can people find you, Mike? What have you been up to on the projection booth?
Well, it was Sci-Fi July. So talking about things like The Omega Man and I Am Legend and The Last Man on Earth, or Krull, good hearty flicks that you can really sink your teeth into. Other things like It Happened Here, which was a mockumentary kind of thing about what if the Nazis had taken over Great Britain, which I think just happened this morning. So.
It didn't happen this morning. Britain was just taken over by what can only be described as a total ding-dong.
Oh, yeah. He is, he's something. So, that's the kind of stuff that I've been up to lately. And you can find me over at projectionboothpodcast.com.
You're not going to plug anything else?
Well, you were asking me what I was doing at the projection booth. You didn't talk about the Kolchak tapes, which people can hear our final episode, not of the show, but final discussion of Kolchak 2005, Night Stalker 2005, where we were joined by screenwriter, TV writer Richard Hatem, where we spoke all about what's the frequency Kolchak. And that was a lot of fun. And hopefully soon we'll be recording another episode of our Twilight Zone 85 podcast, Dreams for Sale, where we can talk about episodes of that particular show from the 1980s.
What is the frequency, Kolchak? I've been listening to so much REM because of that episode. Just, constantly. It's the entire REM, discography.
I'm not sorry.
Kind of one. I'm not sorry. REM's great. If the only song you know by REM is It's the End of the World as We Know It, you probably need to expand your REM.
That's still a great song.
Oh, sure.
So much better than Everybody Hurts and Shiny Happy People. God, I couldn't stand Shiny Happy People.
Yes, me either.
They played that so many times on the radio, back when there was radio.
There's still radio, but it's over the satellites. Ooh, spooky. You can find me when I'm not talking Twilight Zone or Kolchak. You can find me on the Chronicles from the Crypt podcast, where I talk about Tales from the Crypt with our good friend Father Malone. We do that once every 2 weeks. And also on a brand new podcast called The One Season Show with my good friend and co-host Jess Byard, where we talk about shows that only lasted one season. I think it's rather self-explanatory, but there's the explanation if you needed one. You can check those out over at chroniclesftc.com and oneseasonshow.com, respectively. Big thanks, as always, to _91 for Thunderous, which is the intro-outro for the Culture Cast, and we'll catch you on the next episode.